It's been a little while since Nintendo held a Direct, but there's been a lot of different rumors and leaks building up lately in terms of what they might have going on in the future, and one of the biggest ones has to do with the Nintendo Online service. Data miners have been looking at the source code for the emulator that comes as a part of Nintendo Online that allows people to play NES games, and it seems as though there are signs pointing to two very big things. The first thing that a lot of people have been talking about is the addition of a number of SNES games and just the concept of adding an SNES emulator to the system. The list of supposed SNES games coming to the Switch currently stands at 22, and as no surprise to no one, shares a lot in common with what's on the SNES Classic, and it's a mixture of both big name games and a few surprise ones as well. For instance, we've got, of course, a number of different Mario games, Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, Super Metroid, but at the same time, we have other titles like Breath of Fire 2, Legend of Mystical Ninja, and Star Fox 2, which is kind of a big deal because that's a game that never came out in the US, and the only way it was made available recently is as part of the SNES Classic, and it was kind of one of the big selling points of it. It was the only way to play Star Fox 2, but now it might be a case that everyone that has a Switch can. This news alone is really cool for the Switch, because as I have said many times before, I'm really not a fan of how Nintendo has been approaching their retro games lately. They keep restarting and doing different systems for each platform, and while I wish they didn't reset again for the Switch, we're at least starting to see signs of growth that more and more games are going to come to it and more platforms, and these are some really good SNES games on the list. But this isn't the only bit of news to come out of these data miners. Another thing that's been talked about and not really dug into by a lot of people yet is that when looking at the list of emulators supported by Online, there's 4. One for the Nintendo, one supposedly for the SNES, and 2 mystery ones. Now, there are a few different possibilities for what these emulators could be for, and I think there's a couple different top candidates that are a little more likely than others, and I want to talk about some of the biggest ones. And the first one that I think really has the highest priority after SNES is Game Boy. And this could either be for just classic Game Boy on its own, going all the way through Game Boy Color, maybe having a separate one that's Game Boy Advance, or even all as one. It's not entirely clear, but it's possible that those last 2 emulators could just be Game Boy in all of its different forms. Not to mention the fact that because the Game Boy Advance and Game Boy are such older systems and are much simpler, they'd be a lot easier to emulate on the Switch, and there's a lot of really awesome games on there to choose from. Now, while I do think Game Boy is the most likely, there are of course other possibilities that are, well, much more hyped for a lot of people. I mean, the Classic Edition systems have definitely renewed people wanting to get a lot of their favorite games growing up on current systems, or some way to easily play them. While the NES and SNES Classic have certainly served their purposes for those systems, now people want an N64 Classic. And before the Switch even came out, there was one system that people have been really wanting to be made available on Nintendo's newest platform, and this might be finally the time for us to have the GameCube. The GameCube is a beloved favorite for a lot of longtime Nintendo fans, and while its actual sales history wasn't the best because the PS2 was just an obscene monster at the time, there is a great catalog of titles on the GameCube that haven't really been made available much outside of a couple HD remakes. And this is exactly why it would make a lot of sense for the time to really happen to start seeing a lot of those games come back and be made available on the Switch. I mean, after all, sure, there are HD remakes of stuff like both Zelda games that came out on it, like Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. Resident Evil 4 has been remade on basically everything, but we still don't have really any ways of playing some of the great Nintendo titles like Super Mario Sunshine or Fire Emblem. There's just a lot of great quality titles that could be made available on Nintendo Switch Online, and there's already so much stuff built in to make this really easy on the Switch. By the way, if you're looking for a way to customize your Switch and maybe celebrate one of your favorite old systems, like the GameCube, a really easy way to do that is to use skins like from today's sponsor, Dbrand. They have a whole line of Switch skins that are perfectly safe to use. You can use them for the Joy-Cons, the Switch itself, and even for the dock. You can get them in a variety of colors like these awesome purple ones right here. If you want to check them out, just go to the link down below. For instance, a big promotional thing that Nintendo did as part of the NES coming to the Nintendo Switch Online service was releasing these NES-style Joy-Cons, where they're NES controllers, but they have the little sliders to attach to the side of your Switch, and they kind of work like Joy-Cons, but the main point is using them for the NES emulator. Well, there already is that for the GameCube on the Switch. There's adapters that let you use GameCube controllers on your Switch, and there's even third-party controllers that are designed to just be wireless GameCube controllers. There's already so much accessory support for it on the Switch that it just would make sense for Nintendo to bring the games over too. It's about time.